Folks, Michael Rayo here with Mike Petrie. I'm here to talk to you about some IU football today on the Hoosier Hurry Up. Mike, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Sufficiently recovered from Saturday.
Fantastic. I'm still a little I'm still running a little bit of a hangover from it, but I'm actually I'm here. You can see in my childhood room with my five newspaper of IU's five basketball titles, so I'm sufficiently in the mood to talk some IU football. It was definitely a tough one for us. As you all have seen, Indiana really took one on the chin this weekend against Maryland. Um, Mike, we talked about this on the podcast last week. This Maryland team was pretty good, but I don't think anyone expected them to play as well as we saw this past weekend.
No, I think what the lesson that IU will learn and has always learned is that the margin for error is just so thin.
Right.
And when you're not that good to begin with, and you're playing a lot of teams that are kind of in this, it's not even a Big Two and Little Ten now. It's Big One-ish and little everybody else. So, you're looking at 12, 13 teams that conceivably can beat each other by 3 touchdowns whenever they take the field, but it can swing one way or to the other. I think that what IU has to do is to capitalize on games where they play really well. Fortunately, they were able to come away from the Missouri game with a win, where they played well enough. And if you are, it, it, the problem is though that there will be games where the other team plays really well. There will be games where you don't play as well, and when that happens, you've got to be on the guard for getting beat like they did.
For
Uh,
sure.
but the lesson in all of that is that when you play well, you have to win, basically.
Right. I mean, there really wasn't a thing that went right for Indiana this week. The passing game was rough. The rushing game was really not what you would expect out of this Indiana team, and the defense, unfortunately, even though they weren't as bad as they could have been,
Right.
it was pretty tough. I mean, you're looking at some statistics here. I mean, there's not really too many positives. Indiana struggled offensively and defensively, in particular, on passing downs. Really couldn't get anything going in the passing game this week. It's pretty typical for Indiana to struggle on passing downs in the defensive game, but this week it was even more rough than usual. I mean, you saw those third and 14s, third and 15s. I mean, I tweeted out, oh, it's third and 15. They've got us right where they want us, and it
Right.
really did seem like it this entire weekend. I mean, did you see even when they went to their backup quarterback? I mean, they didn't really miss a beat. Are
No,
you
not at
worried
all.
about our cornerbacks or a pass rush, or what are you seeing here?
I think that the pass rush was completely ineffective, and that exposed the cornerbacks more so than it's not so much that they're bad; it's that you just can't leave them exposed.
Right.
A proper system, um, and in which essentially you are able to cut down on the quarterback's time,
Hmm.
or a proper system in which you're able to kind of hide them in a kind of conservative package of defense will allow you uh, to let them play effectively.
Right.
But in a system where you are blitzing to try to get to the quarterback and it's not getting there, you're just leaving them exposed, and that's going to open things up way too much for quarterbacks. Really, the best thing in the world for a quarterback is a blitz that doesn't come home,
Oh,
because
for sure.
if you blitz, you are telling the quarterback really ahead of time, here's the area of the field that you have to throw to,
Hmm.
and if you don't get there, then you're essentially leaving that area of the field wide open for long stretches of time, and we saw that on Saturday.
Right. I mean, and this wasn't a passing game that we were particularly afraid of this past week,
No.
especially after seeing, Indiana do so much in terms of getting to the quarterback in the Missouri game. They really were getting after Matty Mock, and
Right.
unfortunately, whether it was the starter or the backup, they just couldn't get after Maryland. I mean,
No,
it's
in particular, what I would say was least concerning to me from a Maryland standpoint was the fact they weren't a particularly accurate passing team. Um,
right.
those are the types of teams that are going to give IU trouble. Are the teams that complete, you know, 70 passes, even if it's short passing, um, and you're going to see the death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Right.
Uh, the when you've got a low percentage passer, that should play to IU's strengths and kind of hide their weaknesses. If the cornerbacks, are not as good in coverage, well, that's not going to be as big of a problem if the quarterback's only going to be completing 50% of the passes anyway.
Mhm.
And also that generally leads to quarterbacks whom the pass rush can get to and have a little more of an impact on. But the pass rush was pretty much worthless uh, on Saturday, and it was really set up by the fact that they didn't get a whole lot of push on the running game either. I mean, I think that on both sides you could just tell the line play was dramatically in Maryland's favor.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, whether it was Indiana trying to get a push in the running game, whether it was Indiana trying to protect Nate Sudfeld, I mean, Sudfeld did a heck of a lot more running against
Mm-hmm.
Maryland than you saw in the Missouri game. But Indiana really, especially on third down, just could not
Right.
get the push that was necessary. I mean, it was really disappointing because you look at it, and Indiana, there were a few situations where they could have gotten this Maryland team off the field,
Mm-hmm.
and they just flat out couldn't make the play.
Sure.
It wasn't just it wasn't just a freak bomb down the field. It was, the screen game was incredibly effective for Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana was playing their cornerbacks really far off the line, and unfortunately, just couldn't break a block. They just couldn't make a
Right.
play. And Maryland looked a lot faster. They looked a lot stronger on the lines. It just was that there weren't really many positives you could take out of this game at all.
No, I mean it had all the makings of the kind of classic hangover game
Right.
for IU, which is disappointing because they did get a huge crowd there, and they had kind of everything lined up for if they put out a good effort. I think they get everybody to buy in. Instead, they showed 40,000 people what a flat football team looks like, and I never really liked to question players' effort. I never liked to question anything like that. But
Hmm.
it wasn't so much an effort thing as it was just a focus thing. They just looked flat, kind of from the word go, and that was disappointing.
It absolutely was disappointing. I mean, I can't really say too much for what was in the locker room, but I mean, on the
Sure,
field, it just was, it wasn't great. I mean,
it was
this was
deflating.
even
Yeah.
this was actually the first week of the year that Indiana was significantly worse on standard downs as well as
Yeah.
passing downs as opposed to their opponent. Maryland just, I mean, they kicked our butts on first, second, third, fourth down, whatever the heck you want
Sure.
to call it. I mean, it's though honestly, you look at it and this game would have looked a little bit differently if Indiana had got a couple of explosive plays. I mean,
Right.
they unfortunately they had two that were wiped off the board by
Hmm.
penalties. And honestly, one of them, the block in the back, I do think was a justified call. That
Uh-huh.
very clearly was a block in the back, but that wasn't a hold. I mean, on
Yeah.
the Tevin Coleman run, that flat out was not a hold. That just
No.
was a rough call.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
That,
so that seriously did hurt. I mean, if you're talking about that Coleman run, I mean, being in there, I think it's a 20-16 game going into half, and it's a different football game. But
right.
unfortunately, they just dug themselves a hole that was too big to get out of. So.
Hmm.
I mean, but you look at it in terms of penalties. I mean, Maryland did have more penalty yards on the day, but I do think that Indiana, definitely the ones on Indiana, had a bigger impact on the game. I mean,
Right. I
so
mean, the biggest penalties on Maryland, they had a roughing the kicker, which extended an IU drive, and then IU still
Right.
had to punt 3 plays later, if I remember right. They had a roughing the passer that I think extended a drive that led to a field goal.
Right.
But yeah, nothing that wiped out, giant gains or giant touchdowns or anything like that. Um, it the penalties were somewhat surprising from Maryland's end. Generally, from what I had remembered, they were, especially when Edsel was at UConn, that was something that was they were very much the kind of the Mark D'Antonio type of efficiency and discipline,
Mhm.
from what I had remembered, and so I was surprised to see, especially some of those penalties were
Oh, they
pretty
were bad.
reckless play.
Yeah, they were bad penalties, but I
Yeah,
mean, they honestly, you're right. They bailed out Indiana on a couple of drives. I mean, because
sure.
honestly, you look at it. I mean, the passing game for Indiana just wasn't good enough to win a Big Ten football game. I mean,
No.
and there's a lot of blame being thrown around. There was a Indiana blog. I'm honestly forgetting which one, but they flat out called Nate Sudfeld out after the game and said that it just wasn't good enough to win the game. I mean, what can we expect this passing game to get better at this point? I mean, we're
I
four games
I
into
would
the
think
season.
so. I think the biggest problem with passing game is that, especially, it seems like the Kevin Wilson's thing is very much a timing based system, and when the
Right,
offensive line is not blocking, that throws the timing off for everybody. Now,
right.
there has to be a better backup plan because there will be times when the offensive line is getting beat off the ball, but you just can't you really can't expect that passing game to have the results that it did, especially last year,
Hmm.
without the offensive line really holding up its end of the bargain. And that just wasn't happening at all. It didn't allow the wide receivers to get down the field. It didn't allow for anything else. And I will say, there were a couple of just brutal drops. But
Yeah.
every team will have that, and there were a couple that were very much Nate Sudfeld's fault. Whether he threw it behind a guy, too high, too low, what have you, or just kind of getting a different feel for uh, what they were expecting him to should say what they were expecting him to throw. Miscommunication with the wide receivers. There was plenty of that to go around. So I mean, it was sort of any possible way they could screw up, they screwed up.
Yeah, it's you did highlight with Sudfeld that the receive just not quite on the same page as the
Yep.
receivers. One of the things that concerns me, and this is something that I think we did address early on in the season. I
Hmm.
mean, these wide receivers are just small, man. I mean,
Hmm.
it's ultimately it's very simplistic analysis, but you look at it, and when Ja'Shawn Harris and Shane Wynn are on the field at the same time, you've got two guys who are 5'7" or below. I mean,
Right.
and honestly, if you call them 5'8", I don't know that they're 5'8" in platform shoes.
Right.
So I mean, it's ultimately your window is going to be a lot smaller. I mean, if they put a cornerback with any decent size on him,
Hmm.
you really have to throw a pass perfectly in order to get that into
Right.
that window. So I mean, honestly, Sudfeld's margin for error on a pass is not nearly as big as it was when he was throwing the ball to Kofi Hughes, Ted Bolzer, Cody Latimer. I mean, honestly, I think that I know that there were a lot of people who expected this offense to take a step back in the passing game this year with the loss of
Hmm.
those receivers, but I don't know that anyone expected it to be this big.
Right. Hughes in particular, I think in retrospect, you really come to appreciate how many of those circus catches he was able to make, and
It's fantastic.
how wide of a catch radius he essentially had, to use one of those geeky sports science
Right.
terms. He could go anywhere, within 180 degrees of his body. He could contortion himself to catch pretty much anything.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's and Indiana is going to have some of that as time goes on. I mean,
Hmm.
Simeon Cobbs is a guy who can really help you there.
Sure.
Dominique Booth, unfortunately, he's not been quite early on what I think a lot of Hoosier fans expected him to be early. He's just
Right.
struggling a little bit to get off the line. But it's I haven't lost hope in him yet. I mean, he's a really talented kid. So I mean,
Sure.
as time goes on, I do think that there's going to be more size that factors into the passing game. But I think that that's probably a year-to-year issue and not really something you're going to fix in 2 or 3 weeks.
Right. I mean, I think in the NFL, and you'll notice it's fairly rare. It's becoming less rare, but it's fairly rare for a rookie wide receiver to make an impact just because you see a big jump up
Right.
in the physical level of the opponents that they're going against. And I imagine you're seeing the same thing with the high school to college jump, that there's no adjustment time for these receivers to get up to speed. I think they're going to have to get up to speed, and I think we're going to have to live with the fact that it'll be adequate this year, and maybe with the hopes of it becoming a big strength
Right.
in the following years.
Right, and it's unfortunate. I mean, hopefully, if you look at it and you're really thinking about it, if I had to put my money into some coach to get a workable passing game here, I probably would put it in Kevin Wilson. I mean, the guy. The guy knows how to build a solid offense, and the offense isn't bad. It's average this year.
Right.
Even with the jump up in defense, and honestly, you look at it, the defense from an efficiency standpoint is still doing pretty darn well. I mean, they're ranked 68th in S&P defense right now, which honestly, that's what we were hoping for in best case scenario going into this year. We didn't really expect as big of a drop off with the offense as I think we're seeing so far.
Right, and I think that Tevin Coleman's ability to make so many big plays probably hid some of the other issues that they were having. But I think you'll see the improvement. I think that you're never your worst game, and you're never your best game. And so I think that they just have to find that happy medium on offense in a way where the passing game is at least able to complement that rushing attack. And I think it'll all work off of that rushing attack. And that when the rushing attack isn't really getting a whole lot, and defenses don't have to commit extra people to that to the box to stop the run, all of a sudden that just clouds up the passing game that much more.
Well, and you saw in the Indiana State game, they really loaded up to stop. They actually loaded up to stop the pass, and unfortunately, fortunately, Tevin Coleman, excuse me, Tevin Coleman went off that day. You're seeing things actually turn completely on their head. Right now, as teams are starting to load up the box and really test Nate Sudfeld. So, I mean, it's you're going to have to see Indiana take advantage of advantageous passing situations. But unfortunately, you look at it in passing downs right now, they're actually bottom 20% in the country, which I don't think anyone expected. So, I mean, just kind of to put a bow on this Maryland game, I mean, it's obviously a really deflating loss for the fan base. I don't think that we're going to expect as big of a crowd this week as we got last week. It really was another great opportunity for Indiana that just unfortunately didn't pan out, which is kind of been the mantra for us here for a while.
Right.
But
going on 18 years.
going on longer than that.
Yeah.
But coming up this weekend, Indiana does have a contest against North Texas. If we were looking for a get-right game, it's actually a pretty darn good opportunity. This North Texas team, if you look at it from their competition against BCS teams, they're 1-2 right now against BCS teams, 2-2 overall. Their metrics aren't particularly good. Right now, they're ranked 102nd overall in FEI and 127th in S&P, which is second to last in the country. I mean, and that's actually against a very weak schedule. So, I mean, it's it's not the toughest talent that we're going to be facing this weekend. It is a ton of guys from Texas. I think I saw that North Texas actually has more guys from the state of Texas than any other team in the country. So I
Wow.
mean there's a lot of talent in that state to go around.
Sure.
I mean, and so you're going to see some pretty talented football players, but it just hasn't come together for them so far this year.
Right. From little I've seen, they seem to try to win games with their defense.
Hmm.
So, to whatever degree they're able to do that, I think the only concern on my end is that IU, is going to be feeling the heat for sure. This
Right.
is a game when you're playing in a game that you should win, and you are in the spot that IU's in. That's a game you have to win, and a team that is puts their money into the defense, so to speak, is a concern. Maybe if they get a couple of stops, people start getting a little antsy in the stands, or especially if they were to get a defensive touchdown early on, that would be kind of the one path that I would see to IU losing, is that happens. Maybe IU gets tight and things kind of unravel. But yeah, this is a game that IU has to win. I mean, really, no two ways about it. They've got to beat an opponent like this. They've got to beat an opponent like this anyway. But especially when you lose to a MAC school, you've got to be able to, you got yourself right with the Missouri win, but you've got to stay on schedule. To take the term from what we were talking about with their offense, you've got to be able to say, you went 3-1 outside of the Big Ten. You can find 3 Big Ten wins somewhere.
For sure. I mean, this North Texas, this is a game, like you said, that Indiana absolutely has to win. I mean, the margin for error, we lost it as quickly as we gained it back,
Sure.
unfortunately. But this is a team that if Indiana plays the way that they're capable of, which unfortunately is not a given, but if they play the way that they're capable of, and maybe even 80% of what they're capable of, they should beat this North Texas team. Unfortunately, last week shows you that the numbers aren't always going to tell you everything. They did show us that third downs were going to be pretty important, and lo and behold, they were. But I mean, it's just unfortunately nothing's ever guaranteed. I mean, so.
Sure.
Indiana really has to put together a good effort. That they obviously, I mean, you saw the quotes after the game where Nate Sudfeld said, it just doesn't happen for us every game, and if this game really shows us what can happen if we're not on the same page, and unfortunately, that can happen against anybody. So I mean, Indiana should win this game, and they should win it by a few touchdowns. I'm hoping that we can see something out of the passing game this week, and not just 400 yards from Devin Coleman.
Right.
Because if Indiana wants to really destroy North Texas with a rush, they should be able to do so. It's kind of a pick your score game if you're looking at the numbers, but unfortunately that. You never know. I know that Kevin Wilson is really trying to hype up this North Texas defense. It's not really there if you're looking at results, but they are high up in the rankings for quarterback sacks. So I mean they've got that going for them, but it's really not been enough to lead to many wins. Except for I think they beat SMU, who is getting they're getting throttled by everyone that they play right now.
Right. Not the Pony Express. I think that and I saw the point about the sacks. I think that actually, as much as anything, should be a harbinger of good things for the IU passing offense, because again, that shows that they are aggressive. That shows that they're going to challenge the IU receivers probably at the line, and if you can get some separation there. And the line is able to hold off a blitz for long enough, that should open up some better windows for Sudfeld to throw through. But it's a matter of the offensive line has to do its job. And if I were assigning blame from the Maryland game, the offensive line gets a fair amount of that blame. because they were not particularly effective run blocking or pass blocking. So hopefully they're able to step up to the challenge.
Right, and this Indiana team, Wilson said after the Missouri win, this is the same bunch of bums that lost to Bowling Green State.
Right.
Well, you have to say this week that this is the same bunch of guys who went into Missouri and beat the Tigers on the road. Who, if you didn't notice,
came back,
went into
beat
Columbia and beat South Carolina. So I mean, it's still a team on their day that can beat a lot of really good football teams, in particular in what must be said is a really crappy conference this year. I mean, there's not any team in this league that looks unbeatable at this stage. And I still think, I mean, you saw Northwestern trash Penn State this past week, and I that's a team that a lot of people were scared of. I mean,
Northwestern looked awful for the first 4 weeks. So.
It's rough, and Iowa looked pretty bad for a few quarters against Purdue too. So I mean, it's like, this is still a schedule that Indiana can pick off a few wins. I just, we kind of have to slow our roll a bit after getting so excited with the Missouri game because, it's just the football gods deemed it so. I mean, it's unfortunately. Stringing results together has never been a strength of this Indiana football program. No. But hopefully, we can see a good get-right game this weekend against North Texas. So, I mean, if you're just ballparking here, putting you on the spot, I mean, what's your guess as to what we see this weekend out of a final score?
Especially the fact that North Texas doesn't pose a whole lot of offensive threat, I think that this could be a 31-10 type of a game. Win by a couple of touchdowns, feel pretty comfortable. Probably looks a lot like the Indiana State game, even if it's a little bit ugly. It's a game that they should win and win fairly handily and never really get challenged.
Right, and I hear you there. I mean, I actually do. I agree that the Indiana State is a really fantastic kind of, because I mean, you look at Indiana State, they went into Ball State and I think they won the next week. So I mean, it may not be as big of a talent gulf as you're thinking.
Right.
But I mean, I don't really know what to believe anymore because I'm actually, even though I'm 1-3 on predictions this year.
Right.
So I mean, I think Indiana's going to win the game by a couple touchdowns. I'm going to say 28-14. I think North Texas probably puts in one late to make it look a little bit closer than it might have been. I don't think this North Texas team is good enough to come into Bloomington and win, but I've been wrong before. So I mean, it's you never know. Just have to hope that Indiana can put one together here and get on the right track, because it doesn't get any easier after this.
No, this is one that they have to put away for that exact reason. So
fantastic. Well,
Mike,
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate talking to you today. Hoosier fans, certainly look for some more coverage leading up to the North Texas game this weekend. Of course, after the game, check us out. Crimson Cast Live is going to be coming to you on Sunday. Expect us to be back either Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. We'll certainly look forward to talking to you after what's hopefully a Hoosier win against North Texas.
We'll hope so, and see the rest of the season materialize from there.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Mike. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Talk to you